Okay, simple science today. Endosymbiosis. What is endosymbiosis? We're going to make it easy because it's simple science. So the word endo itself, it means in. That's what it means. So let's write that down, in. And symbiosis is a relationship. So we'll just write underneath endo, meaning in. And this is a relationship. It's a mutual relationship. So let's give a really basic explanation for this that you can understand. So it's when an organism lives inside another organism. Now that sounds creepy, right? There's an organism inside you, but there are. We have bacteria inside of us, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the key point here is that they're both helping each other. There's a mutual relationship going on. So I wrote it out for you so you can write it out if you wish. So again, it's an organism. Let's get our pen going again. It's an organism, and let's say we're going to talk about bacteria. So it's this bacteria that lives inside another organism, you, and they both benefit from it. So when we talk about cells, right, we have 30 trillion cells inside our body. But for bacteria, we have over 30 trillion. We have more bacteria inside of us than we have cells. We have the bacteria might be calling us. I heard their ring, right? So we have over 30 trillion bacteria inside of us, and they help us. And specifically, we're going to talk about gut bacteria for this video. So how do they help us? Well, they break down food, break down our food. We need them. Without this, we wouldn't survive. They also help make vitamins, or Flintstone vitamins, especially K. There they are. They're calling again. It'll be something if the bacteria did call you and say they're hungry, right? Well, they actually tell us. They actually tell us when they're hungry, right? So we give them food and they're giving us all this. They break down our food, they help make vitamins for us, and they train. They're like teachers. They train our immune system. So we need them, and I'm only giving you 3 of many, many functions that they do. Well, let's clear that out. I'll give you, and there's a couple of interesting ones. Remember, we have about, clear that out, right? We have, again, 30 trillion bacteria, but in our body, we have 300, in our gut, that is, there's 300 to 500 types of the trillions that are inside of us. And there's some like actinobacteria. I'll write that down, actino, right? Actinobacteria. There's one, E. coli is inside of us. You might think that's bad, and some E. coli is bad, but there's a lot that actually help us, E. coli. And here's a fun one, Firmicutes. Sounds very cute. Firmicutes. Firmicutes. Maybe they're cute. So these are just 3 of the 500 different types that are in our body. And so again, with endosymbiosis here, they're inside us, they're helping us, and we help them. But now, in school, when you talk about endosymbiosis, they're going to talk about endosymbiosis theory. And that's the theory of how we went from prokaryotic cells to eukaryotic cells. So we'll talk about that next. By the way, this is what it is not. This is a tapeworm. You don't want a tapeworm inside you. But if you get a tapeworm inside you, there is no symbiotic relationship going on here. This is a one-way ticket. This tapeworm wants some food from you, but it doesn't benefit you. So that's not endosymbiosis. So we have to talk about prokaryotic and eukaryotic. So prokaryotic, very basically, and here is an oversimplified picture of a bacteria. We'll write that down, bacteria, and bacteria are prokaryotic, right? They're one-celled organisms. They also have no nucleus. They do not have a nucleus. So it's just important you know that. They have no nucleus, and they're one-celled. And they lived on this planet for 1 billion years before eukaryotic cells appeared. They lived about 3.4 billion years ago. That's when they first started coming out. And the Earth's only 4.6 billion years old itself. So the theory is trying to figure out how we went from prokaryotic to eukaryotic. It's also going to talk about how mitochondria and other organelles entered our bodies, which we'll talk about too. So again, with prokaryotic, one cell, they're all prokaryotics have one cell. Now, eukaryotics can have one cell, like amoeba, but for the most part, they're multicellular. But the key for a eukaryotic, let's change the pen, why not? Eukaryotic have a nucleus. Let's write that better. Got a little scratched. Have a nucleus, right? Prokaryotics don't. So if you look at this bacteria in red over here, this stuff right over here, this is the bacteria's DNA. It's its DNA, and it's not in a nucleus. In eukaryotic cells, the DNA is in a nucleus. So we have our DNA, our genetic material, our blueprints that make us in a nucleus, where bacteria does not. And here's an amoeba. Looks like spilled vomit or spilled something, right? But it has a nucleus. So amoebas are eukaryotic because they have a nucleus. So let's look at mitochondria now so we can get a better idea of what is happening with endosymbiosis. So mitochondria is inside our cells. They're the powerhouse of the cell. And the theory states that a long time ago, and maybe 1.45, you think about that exact, 1.45 billion years ago, they actually were not in the cell. So let's say, here's mitochondria. They're the powerhouse of the cell. The powerhouse of the cell. We should write the battery. They're the battery of the cell. Oversimplifying it here, right? They give us energy. Give us energy. So when glucose enters the cell, the mitochondria is going to create energy for us. So maybe 1.45, and they're not just saying 1.4, but they're actually saying 1.45 billion years ago, the mitochondria were not in our cell. They were roaming free. So let's say that this mitochondria here, let's get a better picture here. And by the way, we're going to talk about chloroplasts also. So this mitochondria and their organelles, right? Mitochondria organelles inside the cell. Here they are, right? You can see the arrow. Along with other things, for example, let's make sure our pen is available there. I use green. Like here's the ER, right? The endoplasmic reticulum and other things. These are organelles and they have a special function within the cell. So the mitochondria, 1.45 billion years ago, they were free. They were not in the cell. And so when the endosymbiosis is somehow mitochondria entered the cell and there was this mutual relationship going on. So let's just say that this little mitochondria, we'll call him Mike the mitochondria. So let's say he about 1.45 billion years ago, and by the way, he had his own DNA, right? So mitochondria, write that down. Mitochondria have their own DNA. So Mike the mitochondria have their own DNA. So let's just say we'll have a little DNA in here, and so for somehow there was this other cell, one-celled creature, and there's Mike entering the cell. And over time, he's inside of it. And there's this endosymbiosis going on. And again, later on, maybe, as Mike is in the cell, Mike the mitochondria, there was another organelle entering. It wasn't an organelle yet, and that's the chloroplast. So put it as green. So chloroplasts are in plants. By the way, mitochondria is also in plants. And this chloroplast, which helps the plants with photosynthesis. So eventually, what would happen is now we have this one-celled organism that has these organelles in it that's benefiting from it. And then you would get hosts of other cells joining together, creating multi-celled creatures. That's what basically the theory is stating. So let's review that. So Mike the mitochondria, 1.45 billion years ago, would enter some other prokaryotic cell. We'll call it a prokaryotic. Remember, it has only one cell and no nucleus. And there it is. Now Mike's inside of it, and there's this mutual relationship going on. And then later, perhaps in plants, this chloroplast would have entered. But with now this mitochondria helping it create energy, put an arrow over here, eventually other one-celled creatures would have formed together and made multi-celled creatures, which we are, which would have been eukaryotic. So we went from prokaryotic to eukaryotic. Write that down. I'll use a different color. Why not? So just to review, remember, the mitochondria lived outside of a cell, and maybe 1.5 billion years ago it entered a prokaryotic cell, like you see here. Now it's inside of it, and they're both helping each other. There's a mutual relationship going on. And if it became a plant, a chloroplast, you see this chloroplast right here, that would have entered the cell also, because plants have mitochondria and chloroplasts. So now you have Mike the mitochondria, inside this one-celled prokaryotic creature, this organism. And now they're benefiting each other. Eventually, maybe they would have joined with other prokaryotics and created a multi-celled creature. So that is exactly what, in basic terms, what endosymbiosis means, the endosymbiosis theory. So that's simple science.